Do you feel like there is a secret conspiracy against you that's trying to confuse you with all the different operation terms that there are? I mean, what exactly is a process and how does it differ from an SOP or a system? And what are policies? In this video, we'll be defining each of these concepts so you can finally have some clarity on what they mean and know how you can implement them in your own business to create some structure and order. Wait around until the end of the video and I'll be showing you a real world example of a meta ads agency. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Sam and I help agency owners, coaches and consultants build scalable businesses that run without them. If you'd like a detailed explanation of the terms that we're going to be exploring today, as well as a step-by-step guide on how to actually systemize your agency, you can check out my training in the link in the description. But without further ado, let's dive in. I'm going to go a bit out of order here, but we're going to start with processes first and explain what they are, and then everything else is a little bit more easier to explain later. So a process is simply a path to a desired result, or to make it even simpler, a process is a task. So for example, host onboarding call is a process, or edit videos for ads is a process. Processes can also include things that the client needs to do. So for example, completing the onboarding form is a process. Signing a contract is a process. In terms of scope, like tasks, processes can usually be completed within up to 4 hours. Though of course, in some cases, some processes may be bigger. In that sense, you don't really need to create new processes, you're already doing them. So if you go ahead and look at your to-do list and see the items that keep on cropping up again and again, those are your processes. So now we know what a process is, let's look at SOPs. So yes, an SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedure, but what does that actually mean? Well, an SOP is just a set of instructions that explains exactly how to complete a given process. And because of that, SOPs typically begin with a how. So for example, if the process is host onboarding call, the SOP is how to host the onboarding call. Or if the process is edit videos for ads, the SOP would be how to edit videos for ads. So when I first learned this, my very next question was, if SOPs are just processes with a how in front of them, why don't we use one over the other? Well, the answer to that has two parts. First of all, some processes may require multiple SOPs. This is to account for the variations in any given process. For example, there may be two ways to host that onboarding call. One way may be when the client has completed the onboarding form, and so we need to ask them less questions, and we might already have access to some of their accounts. And then in the other onboarding call, there may be times where the client hasn't completed the onboarding form, and so we do need to ask those questions, and we do need to get access to their accounts. So there may be one SOP called how to host onboarding call, and then a second one called how to host onboarding call when client hasn't completed the onboarding form. And secondly, some processes may not require any SOPs at all. Therefore, by separating processes and SOPs, we're able to identify all of the processes within a given system without having to create documentation for them just for them to exist. So for example, in Notion, I have one dedicated processes database and one dedicated SOPs database. And so my team can see the full list of steps for a given system, and then only some of those processes may have SOPs where needed. And in some other cases, SOPs just might not be the right tool for the job. And what I'm about to explain here is really the golden piece of nugget of information that I want to get across in this video. SOPs are just one tool in your toolbox when it comes to improving your processes. For example, creating an SOP about how to edit videos for ads probably wouldn't be that helpful. You've already hired editors that know how to edit anyway. But creating some editing assets, for example, templates you like to use, titles, overlays, if you had that as a tool to aid the process, it could be incredibly helpful. So start thinking of SOPs as just one of the many ways that you can aid a given process. Other examples of process tools are automations, forms, pieces of software, checklists, templates, and really anything else that is actually going to help you complete a process. And you'll see some examples of these other type of tools later in the video. If you'd like to learn more about what exactly goes into a good SOP, you can check out my video on how to write SOPs faster here or here. So to define what systems are, let's first define what they're not. Systems are not software. And I'm guilty of using the terms interchangeably, but you'll see across the internet, people refer to putting something into your system or checking the system, when what they really mean is checking the piece of software that has the information. So systems are not software, and systems aren't actually what we refer to when we talk about operating systems. So operating systems first came into existence when we were talking about the OS systems that were running computers and laptops. And then it was popularized in the book Traction that spoke about the EOS system, or the entrepreneurial operating system. Now that really is actually a completely different sort of concept that is talking about codifying a way of working that has your meeting cadence, your processes, as well as how you set objectives, deal with issues, all into one sort of manual or one way of working. When we talk about systems, we're actually looking at something different. So systems are simply just a collection of processes. They're also a collection of people and technologies and interfaces. So systems are just a collection of processes, people, technology, and interfaces. So for example, that onboarding call process would probably belong to the client onboarding system, and that how to edit videos for ads process would actually belong to probably the client setup system. In terms of scope, a system would generally have up to 10 different processes within it. I found that if you add any more processes within a given system, it becomes hard to document and also hard to report on. Now, this is where I may differ with some other operation consultants out there who may refer to systems essentially as your different departments. So your marketing system, your sales system, your fulfillment system. But I've always found it's better to break down your departments into systems and leave departments really just to explain the groups of activity. Some other examples of systems would be your funnel system, your content system, your lead conversion system, your financial forecasting system, and many other things. If you're a full service agency, you can also make use of subsystems. So each of the different services you may provide, so like meta ads, or you may have SEO, or you may have content, they might be your different services that would be your broad systems. And then the different phases of each of those services would be your subsystems. And we'll dive into what I mean exactly later in the video. So to show this in practice, of course, I've built out one of my very recognizable process maps. And this is for a example meta ads agency, but this is what it would probably look like for most meta ad agencies. And so first of all, what I'm going to do is zoom in and show you the different processes that we have here. So as you can see, each of these different rectangles basically represent a different process or a different step in this overall process map. So we have at the very beginning our trigger, which is that the client will pay. So essentially we close the client and we ask them to pay on the call. And then the very first step we have actually splits into two as they happen simultaneously. So first of all, in blue is representing the things that either internally we're completing or things we're completing with the client. And then the things that have been colored in yellow are things the client is completing on their own. And so you can see the first thing that we do is complete what I call a sales report form. And this is essentially a document that the sales team can fill out, and it's going to provide all of the information and context that the fulfillment team need to begin work. And then in the yellow, we can see that the client completes our onboarding funnel. And within the onboarding funnel, they basically get a welcome video that they can watch. They will then be asked to complete their onboarding form. And then finally, they're going to book on to their first call with us. And then as we move on, you can see the other steps go in order. So the next thing we have is actually a automation, and again, colored here in gray. And so based on the sales report form, we then have all of these different, what would originally be called processes. For example, sending an email is now been automated for us, so it can all be scooped up into one single automation process. And so we can go along this timeline here and we can see exactly what happens at each phase of delivering this different service. And we can see sometimes things might go in a cyclical motion. So for example, once we go into the monitoring stage or the ongoing success stage, we might be creating an ad report, hosting a report call, optimizing the ads, and then depending on whether we are looking to upsell the client or if they're asking to be offboarded, if that's no, then we're basically going back to the start, and this is how this retainer works. And then finally, at the end of here, we have the option, if they do graduate, that's where we would finish. So on an upsell, or if unfortunately they offboard, we also have a process in place here for offboarding, as well as an offboarding automation. So as you can see, each of these steps are different processes. Each of them can generally be completed within 4 hours. And what also we can talk about now is how we might improve the process using the different tools we've spoken about. So as we said, some of these might benefit from having an SOP. So for example, hosting this onboarding call, it might be helpful for our client success manager, for example, to have a bit of a script that they go along during this onboarding call. So that could be written up as an SOP, or it could just be a simple checklist. So they make sure they remember the things to say and they check them off. Or it could be helpful to actually make this into a meeting template agenda. And so they can generate a new meeting, call it onboarding call, and then it would have all of the different agenda items they usually go through. But that could have an SOP, that might be helpful. But as we can see in other cases, there might be other ways that we can aid these processes. So for example, that onboarding automation, that all of these different processes could have had SOPs written for them, but that wouldn't have been as helpful as sticking them in an automation and having them become manual to automatic. So that's another example of where we used a different tool instead of an SOP. Just going through here, for example, as we said, we have that editing ads. So it might be helpful here to come up with some editing assets that our editors can rely on to quickly work through. We have a create ads report here. So again, it might be helpful to template a spreadsheet, or maybe we're using Airtable, but basically a way to collect all of our clients' information and results into one place. Probably not as helpful to have an SOP for that. More helpful to have one of our other tools, a template, for example. So those are the processes. Then, as you can see up here in the orange, we first have the different major phases of this process map. And this is what I would define as our systems. So first of all, we have the onboarding system for this process map. Then we have setup system. Then we have the monitoring system, and then we have the upsell system, and then / offboarding system. These would be two separate systems, but obviously for the purpose of this map, we've just used a / there. And so these are systems, as we can see, because they are collecting and grouping processes. And in some cases, they are the interface between two different departments. So when we're looking at the sales team completing the report form, that then gets handed over onto our client success manager to begin the onboarding call. And so that is an interface between two different people. It's also different technologies at work here, different processes. So this is grouping them into a natural grouping here. Going along to the setup, as you can see, we have multiple processes happening. Some things the client's completing, some things we're completing. And so this is a natural grouping and can be defined as a system. And then finally, one step above here, we have the overall parent system, which is the meta ads service. And so this is helpful if we were to have multiple services that we're offering. So we might have this umbrella of the meta ad services, and then the onboarding, setup, monitoring, offboarding as the subsystems. And then again, as an example, if they did SEO as well, we might have the SEO service as a system. And then underneath that, the major phases of that would be the subsystems as well. So if you want to learn how to create your own process maps for your different systems and subsystems in your business, you can check out my how to process video here or here. And if you would like some one-to-one help to have our team install the proven systems and automations that help scale agencies, coaches, and consultants, you can book a call with one of my team using the links down below. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, bye-bye.